Welcome back for more physiology. In particular, we're going to be dealing with some of the side things that your kidneys do, namely buffers and other things that they can control. So we're going to look for what additional things do kidneys do. So from once upon a time ago, we broke down all of the water in the body. We put it into compartments. About 2/3 of your water is found inside of your cells, and the other third is what is found outside of cells. So that's where we get our intracellular and extracellular volumes. Of the extracellular volume, most of it, and this picture is a little off, most of that turns out to be in what we call interstitial fluid, so stuff that's surrounding cells. Very little of it turns out to be part of blood plasma or lymph. Why do I point any of this out? Because we can exchange back and forth, meaning water from inside of your cells can flow into the interstitial space. That's just osmosis through the cell membrane. And we can move water from the blood plasma into that interstitial fluid through capillary exchange. Why bring this up? Because what your kidneys do is they filter blood plasma. But by filtering blood plasma, they can start to warp the interstitial fluid as well as the intracellular fluid spaces. Why would they do that? Because when we look at the different parts of your body, they have different compositions. And since they have different compositions, they need to maintain them. And one of the jobs of the kidney is, let's help maintain those. One of the ways that can happen is through the nephron of the kidney doing its thing. The catch is there's more than one type of nephron. So typically the nephron that we think of and the one that I told you about last time is what we call a cortical nephron, meaning one where it's primarily in the cortex. But we also have nephrons that could be found within the medulla or really close to the medulla, and we call those juxtamedullary nephrons, meaning they're near the medulla. In particular, those juxtamedullary nephrons, they have a structure in them referred to as the juxtaglomerular apparatus, which is a portion of the distal convoluted tubule. And what that turns out to do is it's a blood pressure measurer. It measures blood pressure, which means we can use your kidneys to monitor blood pressure. And it turns out there's an entire system that's set up to allow that to happen. So if the kidney were to notice that there's a drop in blood pressure, what it can do is secrete a chemical, a hormone called renin. Renin inside of your bloodstream with a whole bunch of enzymes eventually forms a compound that we call angiotensin. In particular, it's angiotensin 2, which is that AII, even though it looks like it says all, but it means angiotensin 2. And what that thing is capable of doing is setting off a big variety of responses. One of those responses of angiotensin is it can make your blood vessels, at least those that are capable of contracting, to contract. When they do that, the diameter decreases, so the volume decreases, and that will automatically bring up blood pressure, which will, in turn, warp blood pressure, kidneys happy, because now we can have good blood flow to the heart, or to the kidneys, as it were. But that's not the only thing that will happen. What you could also do is have angiotensin trigger the adrenal cortex, which is the outer portion of the adrenal gland, which is right on top of the kidney, to secrete a chemical called aldosterone. It's technically a hormone. And what aldosterone can do is it will cause the reabsorption of sodium ions, and if you reabsorb sodium, you will reabsorb water. Both of those will increase blood volume, and by increasing blood volume, we will increase blood pressure, which is what the kidney wants. It can also play a trick on the brain, and that would be a portion of the brain referred to as the hypothalamus, which will then send a signal down to the pituitary gland to secrete a chemical called antidiuretic hormone, or ADH. What ADH does is it targets the collecting duct in order to reabsorb more water. If we reabsorb more water, what that will do is increase blood volume, which will increase blood pressure, which is exactly what you were hoping for. You don't need the kidney to set off ADH. It turns out part of your hypothalamus regulates your osmolarity, so how salty are you? And if you're salty enough, you may urinate out water. But if you are too salty, so the osmolarity is a tad too high, we will secrete ADH, and the result of that will be we'll reabsorb water to try and bring the osmolarity back within a normal range, which is 300 milliosmoles. But that's not the only thing that your kidney is capable of doing. Since your kidney in the proximal convoluted tubule uses so much active transport, so much ATP, if it's noticing that it's having an issue obtaining energy, obtaining oxygen, obtaining ATP, what your kidney will turn out to do is it will secrete a chemical called erythropoietin, or EPO, which will go to your bone marrow, which will stimulate the formation of erythrocytes. When that happens, we'll increase the amount of oxygen we can carry, which will mean we can fix the imbalance found in the kidney and we won't secrete any more EPO. The job of your kidneys, we filter the blood. They're going to maintain blood pressure. They also maintain if you have enough red blood cells. These things are doing all sorts of things. Another thing that these organs do is they maintain your body's pH. Body pH is somewhere around 7.4 and within a very narrow range of shifting, as in like a 7.1 to like a 7.7. The numbers aren't important, but somewhere around there, if we exceed those ranges, we start to have issues because proteins become denatured if you go have a pH that's too high, so it's too basic, or it's too low, or too acidic. The way that we can deal with pH in our body turns out to be three ways, because we can have respiratory acids, meaning you're breathing them, and we have metabolic acids, ones that you make yourself because of what you're eating. You turn out to have very slow systems if we deal with your kidneys, because your kidneys can deal with pH just fine, just it takes them a while. We can deal with your lungs, but you have to wait for all your blood to move past your lungs in order to deal with it, and that's assuming that we're dealing with a respiratory acid. Everything else that we have to play with is what we call a buffer system. And buffers are an AP chemistry topic, but they're pretty simple in reality. What you have is a combination of two things. You have what we call the acid, so in this particular case it's the H2CO3, and we have its conjugate, meaning remove a hydrogen. And in that case, it's HCO3 or bicarbonate. These two things together, the bicarbonate and the carbonic acid, create a buffer system. How does this work? Well, if you took an acid and added it into the bloodstream, the bicarbonate is capable of sucking it up and it'll turn itself into carbonic acid. Acid isn't there anymore because it got sucked away by bicarbonate. But what if we added a base? Well, bases suck up hydrogens, which means it could suck a hydrogen off of the carbonic acid, and that turns it back into bicarbonate, the HCO3, which means the base is gone. The result of these things is we can have an immediate fixing of pH, but it's only within reason, because a buffer is there as padding. It's not meant as a solution. But these are among the amazing things that your kidneys are capable of doing.